I finished up another lighting project on my 23 F250. Stick around, I'm going to show you how I put these pod lights in the factory fog light bezel. All right, you're seeing the view of actually the finished product for these lights. But I'm going to talk a little bit about them, and while I'm talking about it, I'm going to have some pictures scrolling across to show you a few of the things that are not probably going to show up on the video, and they're not going to be explained as well just by showing you the pictures. These are the Diode Dynamics SSC1 Pro pod, 19 watt single pod here, mounted into the factory bezel hole right here. I had to use their template and cut out that hole, and it's wired into upfitter switch number 1, which is also working this light. So I do have these on each side tied in, and they are very bright. I'm going to be showing you some of those pictures of how that cutout was done before we get into the other details, say of wiring and other setup and things on how I had to reattach this bezel to make sure it's not going to fall off the truck. If you've ever used the Diode Dynamics SSC1 pod lights, they do have a backlight feature. And I bought these with the amber backlight feature, but I did not wire that up. I'm going to show you some scenarios and videos of that amber light coming on. I just didn't think it fit well with the front of the vehicle, is why I chose not to do the amber backlighting for this. Another thing I'm going to show you on these lights is how do you swap the lens out. I had to order my lights from Diode Dynamics with the flood pattern already installed, and I wanted to change that out to the wide pattern. This is the wide pattern I'm going to be changing out. Diode Dynamics makes this pretty easy swap for you. On the back of these flush mount, there are 4 of these T10 screws in those spots right there. You have to undo that from the faceplate in order to change these lenses out. If you've purchased any Diode Dynamics lights, typically these are in the kit with the light itself. I don't remember, I think it did come in this kit as well, but if you don't have one of those, you could just use any T10 screwdriver. Should be able to get those loose. I've already got this one loose for you, and I was going to show you just a little bit about the lens and what they've done here. This right here is the flood pattern, and this is the wide pattern I'm going to be switching that out to. I don't know if the camera can really show the difference between those two. The best way for me to describe that is the lens, the little bubbles here in the lens look a little bit more pronounced and a little bit larger. These look a little bit more flat, and it looks like there's more of them in this spot. If you look at the back side of one of their lenses, it really is like a projector lens, and it looks pretty nice. It's not just a flat lens there. So how they've mentioned about their TIR optics, it's really nice that I do believe this is part of the reason why their lights look as bright as they do. This is the Pro version. It has a 19 watt chip in there. It only has one chip, which is amazing for how much light this little thing can put out. So there is the one 19 watt in there. And I don't know if you can see here on camera too, but these are the amber backlights. In this example for mine, I'm not going to use the amber backlights, but just so you can kind of see, there are appear to be 3 on this single pod. Another thing that Diode Dynamics has done to keep this easy for the swap here is they have kept a flat spot on the top and the bottom, and in the housing, they have a flat spot there at top and bottom, so you can't get this wrong. And I can imagine if you do, your lights, rather than going, top to bottom, are going to go side to side. So that's how they let you know and how you can tell that you've got this installed correctly. There's a really nice rubber gasket all the way around this lens, so you don't have to worry about this thing leaking. Make sure, though, that you've reseated that properly. You've got this thing kind of turned and flush in there before you try to reinstall that faceplate there. The screws here, I am going to put Loctite back on these when I put them in. Reason being is they were just the initial, taking those out, just initial turn was a little bit tight. And I can assume by looking at the screws, it looked like there was blue Loctite. If you've never used Loctite, blue is the removable type. Definitely don't put red on there. These are stainless steel screws going into aluminum. So that blue, just a little touch of blue on there is going to be enough. Once you got your lens on there, though, you're just going to kind of match that back up. And I would torque these down similar to the way you would tighten a wheel on a car, where you may get them all snug and then go cross until you've got them all the way fully seated. And you're looking for that to just kind of be as tight as you can get it without over torquing that. If you feel like you're going to strip that out with the tools, you're probably tightening it too much. With the flood lens. With the wide lens. For the wiring on this project, I'm going to tap into the wire that I used for upfitter switch number 1 for this 18-inch bar. And that's what's going to power the lights at the fog light bezels as well. For the wiring, I typically use this 16-gauge wire that's got a sheathing over the top of it. I'll also use my nylon sheathing like I normally do to protect it underneath there. On these specific lights, I'm only going to be using the red and black wire. If you're going to want to power up the backlight, if it has that option, you would want to power up this blue wire. You can do that on a parking light signal or even on a different switch. The yellow wire for this application is not going to be used, and that may be for something that's got like a reverse option or a power option when you hit the brakes or something like that. So for mine, just the red and black wire will be used. I'm not going to use the backlight feature for this light. Wiring is now complete. I've got the plug hanging down at each fog light bezel area there. I've got one of the lights mounted, and I'm going to show you how you're wanting to do this. I've got a style line there on the bezel. You don't want to go any further this direction, because if you do, it'll start to tweak this bezel and bend it. And this bezel also starts to curve in that direction. I use this line right here too as a leveling line. It may not be level, but I think I like to look the way it was on the truck. These are stainless steel bolts, and I've already painted those black before I've installed them. To show you the example of the cutout, that's what the cutout should look like before you mount the light. You can see that bolt hole is about right where that line is that I was talking about. You do not want to drill these holes based on the template. You want to get this cut out first, and then you can rotate your light left or right to make sure you're even with that line. Mark those holes, then drill them by using the light as your template. To show you the back of that, there's what the back should look like after you're cut. I just kind of cleaned those holes up where I drilled them through. I did this with a Dremel tool. And then once this bolts in, I am using these little small tabs that I made. They're aluminum. This is 3/4 wide by 1.25 inches long. And I just drilled where it'll just grab a little bit more of that plastic. You can see that rather than just a washer right there. I'm using a small washer and a stainless steel nut there on the back. All right, I've already got this side on. I'm going to show you why I've got the blue tape on there, because this light tends to want to pull the bracket out a little bit, but I've got a fix for that if you're going to do this same modification as me. This one is not on yet, but just to show you, you may or may not be able to see some of that. On this side specifically, I drilled a hole through here, making sure the zip tie I'm going to use will fit through here. On the bracket itself, or on the fog light bezel itself, I drilled a hole right here on that side. You may not be able to see that, but it goes through right here. And when I go to put this on, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put a dab of this 3M sealant. This is an older tube I had, so I had to puncture the side because it wouldn't come through anymore, but this stuff is really good. This is the 3M 540 polyurethane adhesive sealant. So specifically, I'm going to put some right around this area. I'm going to do this side right here as well, just because we've added weight to this bezel that was not there before. This was really just a cover, and now that we've added that fog light, there's a little bit of weight on there, and I don't want to just rely on those small clips to hold this thing permanently, and I didn't want to put any extra fasteners that are going to be visible in this area. So I'm going to put that sealant in these areas, 2 areas here. I'm going to also put some on the back of these clips just around this area, because if for some reason this zip tie came loose, that polyurethane sealant is going to hold that. When the zip tie comes through, it's going to go through this hole here, like that. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to do it this way. See if I show you that. We'll just kind of give you the reference there. So this zip tie is going to be like that. And we're going to go through that hole once we get this all the way on. But as we're threading it through there, it's better like that. As we're threading it through there, we're going to thread it through that area. And when we finish zip tying, it's kind of going to be under that tab like that, so we don't interfere with the clip. So that's what I came up with, because kind of no matter what you do, and as far as I could get this light, it tends to want to bend this out some, and it would tend to want to let loose there just a little bit. Not much, but it's just going to be enough for that tab that I'm going to use the zip tie and that sealant to hold that down permanently. So once I'm done with this one, I'm going to let it dry for about 24 hours to 48 hours before I take my tape off like I did on the other side. I will say this, it was already tight without putting the tape on there. I just put the tape on there just so it's not just this zip tie holding it the whole time. Got both of these taped up and let this dry 24 to 48 hours. It is held on without doing that, but I just didn't want to risk this thing coming off for any reason since we added the weight of the SSC1 pod. I did put a towel underneath this to kind of put pressure, since this is recessed in a little bit, to put pressure on that edge there. And then I did the same thing here to put pressure here. I will say with the zip tie on there, it didn't even move. But I just want to give the sealant time to dry so it's not just reliant on the zip tie here. The sealant will hold it as well, and the sealant will hold this edge right here so this thing won't pop off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry, like I said, 24, 48 hours. Then I'm going to get you some night tests from the back of the vehicle looking forward and from the front of the vehicle looking towards the nose of the truck. For this first brightness test, I'm sitting in the driver's side seat. I'm behind the windshield and I've got the windows rolled up. The headlights are on, but not the brights, and the fog lights are on. So now I'm going to switch upfitter switch number 1 on from the driver's seat. Keep in mind I have a 70% ceramic tint. I'm going to do a little bit of a look over here. I have 20% ceramic tint on the driver and on the passenger window. Now that is headlights, fog lights, the 18-inch bar, and the 2 SSC1 pods. I now have the camera about 6 feet away from the driver's side tire. I'm sitting inside the truck. All the headlights are on, the fog lights are on, the 18-inch bar, and the 2 pod lights are on. I'm going to switch those off, back on. You can see from the front of the vehicle, I have all the lights on. I'm going to walk back with the camera aiming towards the truck so you get an idea what this looks like with all the lights on. I'm in the driver's seat. The headlights and the fog lights are off. The 18-inch bar is on, and the 2 pod lights are on. I've got you positioned 6 feet away from the driver's side tire. The headlights are off and the fog lights are off. This is just the 18-inch bar and the pod lights. Again, the 18-inch bar, pod lights only. I'm going to back up from the truck, let you see that from that direction. I'll turn around. You see how much the pod light is going this way. 18-inch bar this way, and the other pod light going that way. From the driver's seat, these are the pod lights only. You are 6 feet away from the driver's side tire, and this is the pod lights only. This is facing the truck with the pod lights only on. You can see the light that it's sending from this direction, passenger side. This is about center of the truck. That's the driver's side. That completes my installation and review for these Diode Dynamics flush mount Pro pod lights. Hopefully this information was useful or helpful for you, and if it was, please subscribe and share, and that's to the point.